Chapter 7. The nightmare becomes real. The stable wall glowed with a frightening orange light. The bay horse hit the wall with a bang, again and again. Emma rushed to the stable. She had to get in, had to save Amelia from those menacing hooves. But everything moved so slowly. Emma felt like she was in slow motion across the grass toward the stable. But it wasn't the old stable. It was Troy's stable. Then all of a sudden, Amelia stood right in front of her. She had a big wound on her forehead and was holding one of her arms, which looked like it might be broken. "Hurry," she said urgently. "There's still time. You mustn't be too late, as I was. I couldn't save Bruno from the flames. He panicked. I got in the way of the hooves. Dad saved me. But Bruno died in the fire. Don't let the same thing happen again. You can still prevent it. Hurry, hurry!" Emma woke with a start. For a moment she sat in her bed, confused, looking around the room. At first she thought the panic-stricken neighs were part of the dream. But suddenly it occurred to her that this was no dream, it was real. Emma jumped out of bed and practically flew down the stairs while shouting loudly for her dad to wake up. Without waiting to see if he'd heard her, she rushed out the door and sprinted toward the stable. What she saw was a horrible sight, worse than any nightmare. Bright orange flames rising up along the wall and thick smoke billowed forth. Inside was Troy in a terrifying nightmare. He sounded desperate with fear. Emma reached the door and flung it open. Thick black smoke drifted toward her. The heat was overpowering, just like in the dream. Without any thought of her own safety, Emma ran into the flaming inferno. She had to get Troy out before it was too late. Amelia had said there was still time. Emma had to trust it to be true. She fumbled with the bolt on Troy's door for a second, and then tore the door open. "Watch out!" Amelia's voice echoed through her head. Emma threw herself aside in the nick of time. Troy's hooves hit the floor right where she'd just been standing. Emma rolled around and got back on her feet. She mustn't be lying down. Then the dream could come true. She had to get a hold of Troy's halter before he had time to rear up again. She had to get him out. But the flames were making him senseless with fear. Emma suddenly remembered something she'd read once. Quickly, she unbuttoned her pajama top, tore it off, and threw it over Troy's head. He was so surprised by the sudden darkness that he stopped short and remained still on the spot for a moment. Emma grabbed him and pulled him firmly toward the exit. All around her was the sound of ominous crackles and sparks, and it became increasingly hard to breathe. A spark landed on her naked shoulder. Emma vaguely thought it would hurt, but for some reason she didn't feel the pain. The world around her got so dark and strange, and her legs felt like rubber as she tried to lead Troy away from the flames that were closing in on them. "I can't do it," gasped Emma. "Yes, you can." Amelia's voice rang firm and clear inside her head. "Just another couple of steps. Your dad's coming to help you. You can do it. Trust me. I won't let it happen again. Let another horse get killed in a fire on this farm. Never." Emma took another shaky step, and then she felt two strong arms around her waist. They lifted her up. She wanted to protest, to tell her dad that he must help Troy instead, but she couldn't say a word. Everything got hazy, and she slid into a darkness where nothing mattered anymore. "I've never been so scared in my life." Frank looked at Emma with tears in his eyes. It was the day after the fire. They were standing by the pasture looking at Troy, who walked around peacefully and contentedly, biting off tufts of grass. Nobody could tell by looking at him that he'd just been seconds away from getting killed in a fire. Emma shuddered and felt the sting from the burn on her shoulder. The doctor, who had arrived along with the firefighters, had cleaned the wound and put a soothing ointment and bandage on it. Except for the wound and a few burned hairs, Emma was as whole as Troy. "You couldn't possibly have been more afraid than I was." Emma trembled at the thought of what a close call it had been. Half a minute later, and she threw a glance back at what had been the stable. All that was left was a stinky black ruin. And Troy could have been lying inside that ruin, had it not been for Amelia. Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. Her dad put his arms around her and gave her a hug. "I had it all wrong," said Emma with a sob towards his shoulder. "I thought Bruno was evil and attacked Amelia on purpose, but he was just scared senseless because of the fire, and she was knocked unconscious and couldn't save him. But now she was able to save Troy. Is that what you're trying to tell me?" Frank shuddered. Of course Amelia hadn't really been there. Frank didn't believe in ghosts. But still, something strange had happened, and he had to admit that. Emma nodded, letting out a trembling gasp. "That's why I had those nightmares. She was trying to warn me. Some way or other she must have known about the storm, but I still don't understand it. After all, the storm blew over. I thought—" "It wasn't the storm that started the fire," interrupted Frank. "It was an electrical fault in the wiring. At least that's what the firemen thought. I figured there had to be a fault in the house, since the power came and went like that, but apparently it was in the stable." Frank stroked Emma's hair. "The house and the stable must have had some shared electrical circuits. I didn't know. I had no idea those power outages could be dangerous. I just thought they were irritating." He clearly felt bad about it. But fortunately it ended well. Emma looked up at him with a smile. "Troy's all right, and I assume the stable can be rebuilt, can't it?" Frank nodded and gave his daughter a big bear hug that made her whimper. He quickly let go of her. "I'm sorry," he said. "I forgot you're an injured heroine." Emma giggled. "I'm not the hero here," she said. "That honor belongs to Amelia. Without her, Troy wouldn't be standing here healthy and sound. I have a lot to thank her for." "So you do," said Frank, with a tolerant smile. Emma would soon enough come to see that the nightmares and the fire were coincidences that had nothing to do with each other, he thought. Suddenly he gave a start. What was that? He was sure he saw a girl and a dark brown horse running side by side over by the edge of the woods. The girl smiled and waved at him. He blinked, but they were still there. He shook his head and blinked again. This time they were gone. Frank felt relief. It must just have been an illusion. He decided not to mention to anyone what he thought he'd seen, because ghosts don't exist. Everyone knows that, right?